Hello, welcome to Simply Ravy. I'm your host, Ed Ravy. This is the channel where I am simply living up to a little thing I came up with. Everybody has their philosophy of life, and I'm just sharing mine. Today I want to delve into why I left public school teaching, and probably for good, unless somebody comes along and really convinces me that I need to come back into this. I've had my taste of it. I did it for a year and a half, and I'm kind of just done with it. I went through an unconventional route, alternatively certified, things like that in the state of Texas. But maybe it's Texas, maybe it's public schools in general, but there are some things that I left and came back. This goes to a lot of other questions of why are you back in Michigan, why are you back working for Walmart, things like that. I probably should say the world's largest brick and mortar retailer, but everybody knows who that is. So why am I doing all that? And why did that happen? Well, you have to kind of go back to a little bit of history here, so I need to catch you up a little bit on what I've been doing. Number one, I left Michigan in late July of 2021. And I packed pretty much all my worldly possessions in the back of my Jeep Patriot and took off for Texas. I was in the process of a divorce with my now ex-wife, and so I was already dealing with that stress, and I was now making a major move and a major career change. I stayed with my friend for a little while, but I found an apartment that was actually very close to the school that I was working at, just, like literally 2.5 miles away. And in Houston, that's huge. If you've ever lived in Houston, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because the thing that did for me is it kept my gas bill, running my car down to a minimum, and that was a good thing. And I was making decent money, and the first year went pretty well. I had a lot to learn. They had, the mentorship program wasn't all that great. We got there. I picked this school because the award-winning mentorship program, right? Get there, the person who runs that program had retired, and they were looking for somebody new. So didn't really have that. There wasn't a lot of support there. So we didn't have then our educational specialist moved to a different school, and they didn't replace her. So I had no educational specialist to talk to about what I needed to do either. So kind of winged it the first year. Really kind of enjoyed that to a certain extent. Started to dislike some things about the public school system right away. I want to make something very clear before I get into the rest of this, though. I love the kids. I never had really any problems with kids. I'm 6'4", I'm a pretty big guy, so most of the boys and don't challenge somebody that big, and unless they're that big themselves. And I didn't really get a kid that big until my second year. But after all that happened that first year, I thought, yeah, man, this is great. And then I finished up some stuff for my certification that summer, got everything done, went back into the second year. Now at this point, I'm pretty homesick. The first year I had so much to do, I didn't really have to think about it, or whether I liked Texas or liked Houston in general. And the more I thought about it, the more time I spent at home that summer, because I came back to Michigan for the summer, the more I said, man, I miss this. I miss the Four Seasons. I miss the whole feeling that summertime gives you in Michigan. And so when I went back, I was feeling very homesick, a feeling that continued to grow quite readily. In addition, I was alone. I finalized my divorce in September of 2021, so over Zoom of all things, never actually entered a courtroom, but we finalized the divorce. And, it was a stressful moment that first year, but then again, the job itself was kind of stressful, but I was able to basically do things on my own, which I really, really enjoyed. And the second year started off pretty rough because, and it wasn't the kids making it rough, it was the system, okay, because in 2021-22, they were getting back after COVID, and they were just happy to have everybody there. And so they just kind of backed off on a lot of the requirements. And before I knew it, the second year, oh, you got to do this, and you got to do this. And I went from working about 50, 60 hours a week to working 70, 80 hours a week to make up for all this stuff. I found myself at the school far more than at my apartment. And I began to sit down and figure it out. If I took a weekly pay rate and divided it by the amount of hours I was actually working, I was like, I'm not making much more money per hour than I was making working at the world's largest brick and mortar. Okay, I'm putting in all this extra time, and it's not cost effective. And so I would say the first thing I want to say about public school teaching, they don't pay you enough for that shit. Or they need to have an administrative relief where like X number of teachers get a secretary, okay, or something that handles the paperwork so a teacher can focus on teaching. They have you doing a lot of different roles and wearing a lot of different hats, and quite frankly, I think the people that stick with teaching love teaching, okay, and people that don't, they're either stuck and so they stay, or whatever. But it's just, from my perspective, it's just not, you don't get paid enough. I don't care where you work, okay? And I was making, decent, I was making twice as much money as I was making at the world's largest, but when you consider all the extra work I had to do and all the extra time you put into it, you suddenly realize, well, maybe I'm not making that much more money. And in addition, the adults became, I won't say they're bad people, but the bureaucratic pressure, the bureaucratic wheels began to turn. And I also began to develop some high problems with some of the things that Texas education does, which, first of all, I'm a fish out of water down there because I'm an atheist in the middle of the Bible Belt. And people are like, don't you go to church? And I'm like, no. Now, I'm like a lot of people that don't go to church down there, but I never really talked about religion at all. And I try to keep a low profile, but every once in a while it would come out. That's why I kind of dummied down the rabid atheist, and eventually I just kind of stopped doing it because I didn't need the risk of being, yelled at for being an atheist. And in Texas and in the Bible Belt, that can be a real thing. Now, it's Houston, so it's a little bit more cosmopolitan and a little bit more liberal, but I was kind of, worried about some things down there. The atheist groups down there were cool, but they were very small. And I suddenly realized, this could be a real problem. And that was part of it. Homesickness continued, the workload, we got our people back, and the amount of things that you got to get this done, you got to have that done, and we're all going to bring our, there was, all of a sudden the freedom I had the first year to make my own lessons and do my own thing and experiment with how to be a better teacher for myself went out the window. I had to do this cookie cutter, this is the way we're going to teach thing, and that don't work for me. When I do a job, I like to have the freedom to make some decisions about how I'm going to do that job. And ironically, I have more freedom in how I do my job now than I did in the public school system. And I think looking at it, it's like, and then of course curriculum is always an issue. And in Texas, they passed a law basically forbidding teachers to be political activists. I get the spirit of the law, but that puts most social studies teachers in a very awkward position, because how do you know what's going to be considered political activism? Because I'm reading the law and I'm like, well, what is political activism? You haven't defined it. Okay, very well. What do you mean? There's a lot of things that can be considered political activism. If I teach history a certain way, is that political activism? Don't know. They, of course, came down against critical race theory. I get the sentiment because I don't really agree with a lot of the tenets of critical race theory. And I disagree with the fact that, first of all, it's called theory. And in scientific inquiry, theory is the highest level you can achieve. And I think they did that on purpose. It really should be called critical race hypothesis, which is perfectly fine. And we can experiment it and talk about it and things like that. And I don't have a problem with that. But calling it a theory without testing and without being proven and having a lot of controversy about it, yeah, that's not a good way to go. So it really suffered from some PR problems with how they handled presenting it in the first place. So all of this stuff is kind of piling up. I'm going through what I'm looking ahead because I was teaching world geography, but I wanted to be a government economics type teacher. And I'm looking at some of the pitfalls of what I would have to deal with this new Texas law, and I'm like, I just don't want to deal with that. I don't want to, and I missed doing this, getting on social media and talking about things. Well, being a teacher and trying to talk about things, I suddenly began to realize that being a public school teacher they really rob you of a lot of freedom as a public school teacher, particularly when it comes to what to free speech, to advocating, to taking on the government. When the government does something wrong, teachers, in my opinion, teachers' First Amendment rights get violated. Okay, and I'm like, I'm not going to put up with a violation. Well, the money. I said, I don't care about the money. I'm working twice as much as I did before. If you average this out by hour, it's not much more money. I'm like, shit, I'm making $20 an hour, okay, to do this, okay, because there's a lot, the classroom time is the icing on the cake. In that respect, it was a lot like the ministry. Sunday service was the icing on the cake. It's the rest of the stuff that happens behind the scenes, all the work and hours going and preparing lessons and things like that. Nobody sees, okay, and trying to come up with that perfect lesson and whatever, and I'm just like, nah, I can't do it, bro. And that was sad for me because I really loved the kids. The kids were great. I think I touched some people. I really fell in love with Love and Logic as an approach with the kids. And when I brought that up to my AP and to the specialists, they were like, well, we're not familiar with that. We don't want you to make that a goal. Well, they didn't really tell me not to, but they really discouraged me from, pursuing that avenue, but it worked for me. And man, I just, there was a lot of things, boy, they really just make it difficult to be a public school teacher. And I'm a real freedom guy. I'm a libertarian, so it's like, this isn't working for me. And, I looked at the possibility of teaching here in Michigan, and I just, no, the same problems exist. Down there it's the conservative politicians that are screwing up education, and up here it's the liberal politicians that are screwing up education. I really wish, they just stayed out of the way, but education always becomes a political issue. And, that's why I think there's a rise in homeschooling and private schooling, is because people want to get away from the politics. They want to teach their kids or have their kids taught in ways that line up with their personal parental philosophy. And if you can't do that, then, yeah, sure, they're going to go different directions. They're going to go different places. And as a former teacher now, I just kind of look at it and go, no, I don't see it. I don't think that this is going to work. And so a lot of things happened near the end. I had an incident happen with my mental health right before I came home for Christmas. I came home for Christmas, really enjoyed it. My homesickness shot up to a whole new level. Then I went back. I had a couple more incidents with my mental health, and I realized that I was really close to a mental breakdown in a lot of ways. It's kind of dicey to talk about this because it's actually not that long ago. And I got to a point I couldn't do it anymore. I literally mentally could not get up and go and do the job anymore. And so I resigned. I took a lot of personal time I built up over. I mean, don't get me wrong, the benefits of being a teacher, having all that time off in the summer, the weeks off that you get, it's great. But when you're there, it's like 80 hours a week. And it's like, no, I don't have time for that shit. You know, it, it creates, I think they really need to go to all year round school to alleviate that stuff. You know, like have week breaks, you know, every couple of months or so, you know, just to get away from things, allow people to take their families at different times of the year on vacation, stuff like that. So, but it's just like, I just got to a point where I just couldn't do it anymore. And between my high functioning depression and a few other issues, it hit me pretty hard. And so I came back here. I want to thank my middle son Justin for letting me hang with him for a couple of weeks while I found an apartment. Found an apartment in my old hometown. I'm like in town, like really close to downtown, and set this place up. And I began to think about what am I going to do. Got a job back at my old job that let me come back, but it's a long drive, and I don't, the expense of gas is starting to hit me. And so I said, Ed, you could go back to YouTubing, and what you need to do is you need to talk about life. And that's kind of all of that, why I left teaching, is kind of the intro to this channel. I still like being an educator, but I want to do it on my own terms. And I want to talk to adults and, people that are young adults in particular, because I think if there's something I've learned in education, there's something missing when you leave high school. Because everybody's so afraid to do it, you don't really talk about life. You don't really talk about what is your philosophy of life. What are you trying to do with your life? You can either fall into a philosophy of life, because everybody has one. Everybody has a philosophy of how they're going to live their life. Everybody's going to fall into one. Do you want to fall into one, or do you want to intentionally find a philosophy of life that will lead to your own happiness and lead to your own well-being? And this is something I wish I had had in high school. I learned a lot on the football field about this. It created a lot of my stoic attitudes, because I would, in high school, I remember, going to the football practice field every single day and thinking, why am I doing this? I don't get a lot of playing time. I'm a skinny kid. I'm tall and skinny. I don't really have a lot of beef to me. But I had this real I will not quit, attitude. I will not stop. And that's a good thing in a lot of situations. But in some situations, like leaving teaching, it wasn't so good, because it leads me into this trap of, I'm in something I can't do, and then I hit the wall. Well, if you have a better philosophy of life, so you make better choices about what you get into. And that's why I'm heading down this road of Stoicism. I want to really get to the real meat of what Stoicism really is, because a lot of people have a lot of misconceptions. I want to talk about minimalism, essentialism, focusing on the one or two things that really matter. Getting past the whole saying yes to everything and learning to say flippin' no. Learning how to do a lot of different things in life. And I would rather educate along those lines. I often thought to myself, I'm spending more time counseling these kids about life than I am teaching world geography. And I actually like that better. I like that part of teaching quite a bit. Well, how do I do that? How do I reach the largest amount of people with this? And I think I can do that. So I'm targeting basically what I would tell a high school senior and up. What would I tell these people about getting a philosophy of life and starting to learn a philosophy of life? That's what I'm really focusing on. So hopefully you'll enjoy coming along for the ride every day, or almost every day. I want to leave myself a time to take a day off from time to time, if I need it. But once again, I want to thank you for stopping by and listening to an old man pontificate about philosophy. My ultimate goal is to be the philosopher in the cabin in the woods someday. Just a little note about this. I was at work yesterday, and I was pulling a beam, trying to redo some on. We're remodeling our store, and I'm on the remodel team. And I was pulling at a steel beam, that we use for, stuff, and caught myself like literally bang, right in the face. So that's why I have the bruise on my cheek. Hopefully it'll go away in a couple days. It's not too bad. But I know some of you are going to be concerned and ask. So, but hopefully you'll come along with me on this journey. I want to thank you for stopping by. Like, share, subscribe, do all these things. Hit your notification bell if you want to continue to see this content. I appreciate every single one of you. The goal is to grow this channel as quickly as possible. That's why I'm doing videos every day for a while. And, welcome to Simply Raby. I'm your host, Ed Raby, and thank you once again for stopping by, and have a great day.